All right. Today we are sitting with Ray New, the Director of Coaching for Spoken Worldwide, Director of Orality Coaching of Spoken Worldwide. And Ray, before we really get started on how the coaching program works here at Spoken, I'd really love to hear really what drew you to orality. You were a missionary with the Church of the Nazarene, and you were charged with um, really focusing on doctrinal uh, elements and teaching a curriculum to pastors and or qualifying them, I believe, to become pastors in the Church of the Nazarene. So would you tell us a little bit about what you were charged with and some of the unique challenges you saw in Belize and how you adapted the existing curriculum to meet the audience's need?
Gonna go old school. So yeah, my assignment was to, as the sole professor in the country of Belize for this effort, was to take the pastors through 30 different courses, which is crazy.
How long were each of those courses in general?
Well, we taught them in an intensive format, so we would do them in a week. They can be done in an entire semester, but the bulk of the material had been vetted by the denomination and put together and approved, of course. And most of them ended up being, 250, 350 pages of content,
Okay.
which was inappropriate. And so I would try to first break that down to 30, 35 pages of fill in the blank type material. Most of the pastors in Belize that we were training were Maya and Quechua Indians. There was also Creole, a little bit of Garifuna influence, some Hispanic, but the majority of them did not have much education.
Okay.
So many were subsistence farmers, literally doing the slash and burn method in the jungle to cut down part of the jungle, let it dry out, burn it up, plant their corn or beans or whatever it might be. And so education had not been a high priority for many just because of life. And then secondly, availability. It wasn't always available. So the good thing was Belize used to be British Honduras, so the official language is English. So I felt like we at least were communicating. That can be its own deception. My wife and I had been to Belize many times prior to that on short-term mission trips. And so we knew the country, we knew the people, we knew to use simple English. And yet, Ed, as I was teaching, I found that my English wasn't easy enough. So the courses, like I say, there was 30 different ones, and they comprise a lot of theological courses, as you might imagine, because this is working to help them fulfill the educational requirements for ordination.
Okay.
Within the denomination.
Now, had they chosen that they wanted to be a pastor, or had these people been identified by the denomination as potential pastors, or how had they gotten into the course?
Yeah, most of them were probably in the role of pastor because God put his thumb in their back and pushed them forward.
Okay.
And
thumbprints on the back. That's a new term that we'll use.
Yeah, there would be quite a few of them that would say, I'm not a pastor. I'm just the leader here.
Okay.
Because they felt like, well, that's too much. But they were performing the role. They were fulfilling the requirements.
So they didn't want to claim the authority, but they were the authority.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Either by design or default, they were the person in charge. So, yeah. And long story short, I'll share that I would teach in 3 different parts of the country. I was the one that was most mobile. I would go to them and we would hold these 1-week intensives in different places. And in some places it was 2 weekends at a time. And then a lot of variety, trying to meet their needs and make it easy for them. In one of the locations, I gave a take-home test for a Christian education class. It had 4 questions on it. I said, I'll be back in 2 weeks. Just bring it back with you. I came back in 2 weeks. I asked for the test and everybody just sort of looked around.
Oh,
nobody responded. And the Maya and Quechua, they're quiet, they're patient. So I waited. I asked for it again, and now they just are kicking the dirt, staring at the ground.
Mm.
And
So they knew
finally,
the assignment. They understood the assignment.
they knew they had an assignment. The understanding is where it fell short. So
Okay.
finally, one of the ladies spoke up and said, well, brother, there's some words we didn't know. And I'm a fixer. So right away I thought, okay, let's fix this. What did you not know? And in the
All
first
of them.
question, yeah, in the first question, they did not know the word important.
Okay.
And I knew I was in trouble because I knew in the second question, I used the word significant.
Ooh, which is even worse.
Yeah, which is worse. And so that's what happened in each of the 4 questions on a pretty easy topic. There were things they didn't know. And so they just stopped.
Oh,
And my mind went through all these questions of, why didn't you call me? Why didn't you find a dictionary? Why didn't you ask somebody else? Why didn't you help each other? You know, it didn't matter. Even though they're communal people, they didn't do any of this. So I suggested in listening to them and talking to them that maybe an English course would be helpful to boost the level of English. And they were very excited about that. That got immediate response from everybody. Yes, yes, yes. So the next Saturday, I brought my wife back. She had been homeschooling our granddaughter who lived with us. And so she assessed them for about an hour, just talking to them and listening and trying to figure out what grade level are we looking at here. And we knew that most had only gone to school to about 3rd grade.
okay.
And it turned out that that was accurate from the assessment as well. But at the end of the time, Becky goes to the piece of technology, the chalkboard, and she wrote that it is numbers 0 to 10 on the chalkboard. And then she individually asked each person to say how many of her words did they understand. And so that morning, as she had been talking to them, they understood 7 to 8 of every 10 words that she said. Then my loving wife, who supports almost everything I dream up,
What about Ray?
says, yeah, I can't believe she did this, but she said, okay, not today, but when Pastor Ray is teaching, how many of his words do you understand?
Ooh, thanks so
Guess?
much, Becky. 2.
Oh, that's right on. It was 2 to 3. And
Wow.
Ed, I wanted to cry. I can feel it in myself, just like
Even now.
right then. Yeah. I just thought, are you kidding me? I'm trying hard. I'm using little words. Apparently they were too big. And so immediately after just wanting to cry, I thought, I have to fix this. This is my problem. And so I began to explore, what do I do to fix this? And I tried using smaller words and then studying concepts and thinking, what is it about the way we're teaching that's not working? So in the process, I began to experiment with storytelling.
Okay.
And
now let's stop there for a second and just say, okay, so what did you know about storytelling at that point? Why was storytelling an option?
Yeah.
I mean, because you and I, having done this for a long time, obviously now think about storytelling, but that was what year?
That would have been, I hate thinking backwards, that would have been like 08.
Okay.
07 or 08, one of those.
Yeah.
So prior to my going, I had been working at a different organization and doing research and development for a Christian group. Because of that, I knew lots of people in lots of places. And when one of them heard that I was going to Belize to teach pastors, they said, really, you need to learn this thing we're doing. And I didn't know what it was, but it was orality, and it was Bible storytelling.
Okay.
And what we would call interactive Bible storytelling.
Okay.
So I spent a week there. I did really well at it, which shocked maybe everybody. and they tried to figure out, well, why? They said, nobody ever comes here and just does this first time. Why did you do it immediately and do it perfectly?
And who was this?
This was simply the story.
Okay.
And so then we kind of backtracked to find out, why did I do so well? And we realized, well, it's because I had been in the public high schools doing high school ministry in a very similar way.
Okay.
creating conversation.
So before you knew what orality was, what Bible storytelling was, you intuitively were using it years
Yeah.
before when you were doing Youth for Christ ministry.
Yeah, the facilitation part was already in me.
Yeah.
I didn't know it, but so that helped. Yeah, so that was an impetus to, I got to do something. Let me try this thing. So whenever a course that we were doing had a Bible story in the curriculum already, I would switch going from lecture, because we'd have class 8 hours a day. So I'd switch going from lecture to the story format. And for those who don't know, story format is telling a story, repeating it, trying to make sure everybody has it. There's different methods of doing that. And then using open-ended questions to explore the story.
Instead of yes and no questions, you're asking, tell me what you know, tell me what you understand.
Yeah.
You really try to create a dialogue rather than a yes, no answer.
Exactly. And so it's, what do they observe from the story? What are they gaining from the story? Helping them think through the story, which really is just a process of slowing down and spending time there. And it's interesting that so many times for Christians with Bible stories, we think, yeah, I know that story. Because we know the beginning, we know the end, and we think, I got it.
Yeah.
We don't got it. We can talk about that more later. But what happened there, Ed, was we found that class might be going along at this level, we'd switch to Bible storytelling, and it would shoot up to really high engagement. It would stay there the whole time we did that. And then after, it would drop back down. And I saw it so consistently and so regularly. It's like, okay, there's something about this that's working. And the more I began to experiment with it, and the more I began to intentionally build it into the courses, not just devotions, the better the responses were.
And so if, just like anybody, you're just showing, well, okay, if something's not working part of the time, and then I do something that is working, why would I continue to do the thing that's not working?
Yeah, exactly.
Because that's really boring for me and for them, apparently.
Yeah. And it wasn't the right learning style. And honestly, I didn't know a lot about that at the time, because we teach the way we've been taught.
Right.
And so I was doing the same thing.
We've been discipled in a particular way. We're going to disciple others the same way.
Yep. I learned by listening and taking notes, and made it through, school that way. And so I thought, well, that'll work for everybody. Not
Doesn't everybody do it the same way?
No. In fact, it was interesting, a little side here. There was a time when I was giving a test there in the southern part of Belize, and I noticed that the pastors were helping each other during the test time.
We'd call that cheating.
Exactly. And I did. And I said, hey guys, we don't do this. And they were surprised, which surprised me, because they're like, no, we're just helping each other. We're just talking. We're just thinking it through. I'm like, okay, but that's cheating.
This is interesting because when I first started in 2005 doing orality ministry, I had thought about buying MP3 players that had earbuds. And, we would just go to the manufacturer and buy these devices that had earbuds that would come along with them. And then as I began to understand oral cultures, I began to realize that the Western culture is the only culture that would be so selfish as to listen to something by themselves. Yeah. And so I started saying, well, okay, I'm not going to order the earbuds to go with the MP3 player. I'm going to buy another attachment that is going to broadcast to a boombox or something, or somehow provide a speaker system so that a group of people can listen to it. And that was my first, it came early on in the process. So it probably wasn't, I probably never made a bulk order of MP3 players that had earbuds, that came with the shipment. Or if they did come, I was throwing them away just because we had no need for them. And what you're saying there brings back that memory. There is a collective memory. There's a collective interaction and expectation in the cultures we're working with. They're completely different than we think of from the West.
Yeah, they're communal. And that's what I began to realize there. As I looked and started paying attention to what I was seeing and living in, because we lived there for 5 years. And when we had class, especially down south, we were together at a camp for the whole week. So everybody slept in the same place and had all our meals together, and just everything. Life was completely together, just like it is in their village. So they're communal by nature. So what I saw as cheating, they saw as, no, this is what we do. We help each other with everything. We help each other at the farm, with washing the clothes, with, everything is about we.
So don't impose your expectations, your definition of right and wrong on me because we think differently.
Yep. Yep.
Now that by itself, and that has nothing to do with orality, but that has to do with a recognition of cultural expectations and differences.
Yeah. Which are very, very important in the work that we do. We have to pay attention to those in order to get even close to communicating, or as we might want to say, scoring a win. It's a win when we're communicating properly and both sides are being heard and truly understanding each other. So as I began to understand, okay, this isn't cheating, this is how they do life, this is how they do everything, then I began to make some more shifts. I still wanted people to take tests individually. However, what we did do is we changed the study habits. We changed how we did class, a lot more small group activities, a lot more open dialogue, a lot more collaborative communal efforts within class, which really helped a lot. And
well, even when you're making that one recognition that they do everything communally, that is kind of like throwing a grenade in the room. I mean, that blows up everything you know about teaching at that point.
Yep. Changes a lot. And the other thing that happened because of that was, as we made the shift and I began to work on converting as much as I could at that time, the classes into what I was calling hybrids. So it wasn't pure literature, but it was a mixture of oral and written. Those classes became more and more popular, and those classes and that content was repeated in their villages. The other classes,
you didn't even tell them to do that.
Content, they couldn't do it.
Yeah,
it was too much. It was wrong. It wasn't how people thought. But these things started happening. In fact, Fernando is a great example of that. He was a high school graduate. He was sharp. He was the A student, and he was a young pastor. But he came to me one day and he said, "This is not working. I'm trying to teach what you're teaching us, and it's just not working." And we talked about it for a while. And finally, I asked him. I said, "Well, have you tried the storytelling?" He said, "No." I said, "Could you?" He said, "Yeah." So he went off and tried it. And a couple of weeks later, he comes walking in. He's got this huge smile on his face, just huge. I go, "Oh, so what happened?"
Something happened.
And he starts telling me, "This works beautifully." He said, the older women at my church are excited. They're talking, they're telling their stories to their neighbors. He said, "These young ladies are so quick to learn the stories and memorize them and can tell them perfectly." He said, "Everybody's talking." He said, it's amazing." He said,
Can't
"This
stop
has
it.
never, ever happened."
And you're sitting there, go, yeah, so why would I go back and do it the old fashioned way?
Exactly. And I just remember there was one other thing that really helped convince me that this was their preferred style.
Yeah.
Didn't matter what the culture around them says. I went to a community meeting in a village, in fact, in Fernando's village, where he was planting a church, because an issue had come up. Somebody had showed up one day and started working on the land where the church was. So he went to talk to them and says, "What are you doing?" He says, "I'm here working on my land." He says, "This is not your land. This land was given to the church." He said, No, it's mine." So little dispute. They call the village together. They get the elders and the alcalde, the chairman, basically kind of the mayor. But they gather all the people, and different people shared their testimonies. And different people said, "Well, this is what I remember. And this is what I remember." And finally, one older person said, "Well, I remember this, that this person gave the property to this person, and this person gave the property to the church. And the church is here now, and it's theirs." And at that point, the man who had showed up and started working the land stood up and said, "Okay, I'm done. I won't molest you anymore," which is their words for, "I won't bother you." There wasn't a single thing written anywhere
Wow.
They handled every bit of that orally. Everybody was witness. Everybody
Mhm.
agreed. The issue was done. And I thought, aha.
Nobody has a written record of passing deeds down, which is something we in the West don't have any category for. I mean, that was one of the things I remember in one of the first programs that our organization did in South Sudan, was the way that they handled property records is they wrote a song
Mm,
describing the boundaries of the property where there were specific trees or types of trees. Like there's I don't live on the river. I live by the bend in the river where the acacia tree is.
mhm.
And they would sing this song, and everybody had a song in the village that described their property. And everybody knew everybody's song.
Yeah.
And because there wasn't any way to write it down. And so, what you're saying is the same thing, is just these oral cultures trust group memory
Mhm, mhm.
in order to settle disputes, to engage with anything as it relates to history, property, culture, um, what worldview, that's all shared memory.
Yes. So I'm jotting down a thought because it just popped in my head and I've not said it this way before. The songs make things stronger, and we understand that even in our culture because of the melody.
Mhm.
Melodies stick, and we all know some songs from childhood
Yeah,
and songs from growing up that we heard on the radio over and over and over, or on a 45 or a 33 or whatever,
sure.
telling our ages now. But um, I had that experience the other day. A song came on and I knew all the words.
Yeah,
I've never studied it. I didn't even want to know the words to this song,
yeah,
but they're there. And what's really cool about that is that God imprinted us that way.
right.
And so I wanted, the thought that was running through my mind was God imprints our memories through song.
Mm,
And that is shown when God spoke to Moses and told Moses in Deuteronomy, teach this song to the people and they will remember it.
wow.
You
Yeah.
think, okay, well, then when I looked at it and I started counting, because that's what we do in the West, it's 43 verses long. I'm like, oh my gosh,
Yeah, we would think of,
43.
if I've got an assignment to memorize 43 verses for my Bible study class at church or small group, that would feel overwhelming, right?
Mhm. Yeah, put it into song and it's there. And this was God saying they will remember it. It will judge them in the days ahead and all this stuff. So song is incredibly important like that. And that is part of what we do in orality. It comes from paying attention to the cultures we're working with, and they know it because they live it.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring that up. I was just reminded, I was part of Bible Memory Association growing up, and we went to summer camp every summer. And I saw something on Facebook this morning that said, anybody remember this song? And it was called A Story to Tell to the Nations. And I
Mhm,
remember the melody.
mhm.
We have a story to tell to the nations. And, I can remember almost all of that song. And I just saw a post on Facebook, and all of a sudden now I can't get the melody out of my mind.
Mhm,
So you're right. God has wired us this way. We take joy in that.
mhm.
Um, and to your point, I mean, there's sometimes we don't want to remember a particular song or words to a particular song, for whatever reason, but it has been imprinted on our brains,
Yeah, yeah,
and we can pull it up pretty quickly.
yeah. Unbidden.
Yeah.
I mean, the one I was talking about was a non-Christian song. It's a very, very catchy tune. So it's just
Yeah.
one of those that just sticks.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's what happens. So the ones that we intentionally want to stick, I can finish the song you started. They're great. They're devotional for us. They're transformational when they get in and become part of who we are.
So, in the interest of time, you've done a great job, Ray, of talking us through a little bit of what began to motivates you to think about creatively changing this set of coursework for the denomination? You obviously were doing something that you had not been instructed to do. You were adapting based off of the need, and as is your personality, you don't necessarily let rules dictate how you're going to execute a program. So talk to, just, put a bow on this and tell us a little bit about how you navigated the dialogue back upstream, if you will, to your leadership based off
Yeah.
of because I assume that you've got great results by making these adaptations, because you're seeing people respond. They're more engaged with the story versus the traditional model. You've moved into a hybrid, but you're still seeing tremendous uplift or uptake, whatever word you want to use, in terms of learning and reuse of the information. When you started using stories, you've got this momentum going. Talk to me about how that went with your leadership. That, I don't know, was it focused on results, or was it focused on, no, you got to do it our way?
Yes, it was all of that. So, as most things, when you start doing something different, there's going to be those who say you're not doing it right. And fortunately, whatever it is that's in me that's a little stubborn and just says, no, we have to do it this way because it's better for the people, persisted. and again, long story short, I kept looking for what else is out there, what will help us. There was times when we partnered with Walk Through the Bible, this way back then, and I taught Old Testament and New Testament there in that way, mixed with stories. Another missionary friend from the Horn of Africa had developed these pictures to help teach theology. And he sent them to me. They were rough draft, like first edition. And so I did that, and it worked. And so things like that began to leak their way upstream. And so I went to the seminary in Guatemala and talked with them, and I said, what am I allowed to do?
Now that I've done it, what am I allowed to do?
Exactly. Here's what we're doing.
You're the epitome of not asking permission, but asking forgiveness.
We don't tell everything here, Ed. So in the meeting with the seminary, it was really good. We're on seminary grounds. It's higher education to the T. We're in a big boardroom. But the end result was really beautiful, because they said, you know what, we don't care. If your students can accomplish the major goals of each course by the end, we don't care how you get there. And I left just like floating on air.
Oh,
like,
I bet you were.
Okay. And we had our first graduation in Belize. They had not had a graduation in Belize in more than 20 years.
Whoa.
Because things were just backwards and choked and lots of problems. So we had our first graduation. It was held at district assembly. It was a really, really big deal. At graduation, I did something with these pastors. I had them quote from memory all 16 of the articles of faith of the Church of the Nazarene, just one by one. And so many people in the gathering that day were looking around like, what's going on? And many of the other pastors realized they couldn't do that either.
Whoa.
But these guys all learned it because of this combination of pictures and stories and repetition. And it was such a beautiful thing. So slowly, those kind of things helped people to recognize, okay, something's going on and it's going pretty well. In fact, I knew it one day when the senior missionary down there called me on a Monday morning. Class had finished the week before. So Monday morning, he calls me early. He says, how'd class go last week? I said, well, I think pretty well, but you should probably ask, some of the people who were there. He says, I'll do you one better. One of them just left my house. And he just sat here on the couch and told me all 16 of the articles of faith from memory. He said, I can't do that. So I think class went pretty well.
Whoa. So your plan of asking forgiveness worked out really, really well. So well that the leadership was just going, man, we haven't seen this before. We can't even do some of this ourselves.
Yeah.
And so there was a tremendous shift in confidence of what you were able to achieve and what the pastors were able to achieve.
Yeah.
I've got to believe that that news probably passed pretty quickly around the world, in a denomination that was, you know, I don't know, they weren't necessarily seeking change, I would
Right.
say,
Right.
but all of a sudden you've got this, you know, s- um, this light shining out of Belize, for lack of a better term,
Yeah.
of some really exciting things happening.
Yeah. First graduation in 20 some years. I forget now how many people we had. I think it was 11. And then each year we had more. So it did get the attention of some people, including those at headquarters for the International Church. And when we left Belize, all I knew was I had to do story. I didn't know where, I didn't know how. I had met you guys at ION during that time. And that was one of the possible conversations. And when our church said, "Hey, we need to do this," I remember telling you, "Thanks, Ed, but I can't do this right now."
Yeah.
We gotta
That was the
gotta
first
go here.
rejection.
Well, the story wasn't over. That was just one chapter.
That's right. Well, and I think that's that's a great reminder that, we persist. We trust the Lord. And I remember that conversation. We wanted to bring you on board, and you felt the Lord had things for you at the Church of the Nazarene, and He did. And you traveled quite a bit, to share your learnings with the denomination. And yet the Lord opened the door another day for us together. And we'll save that for the next episode. But for now, Ray, I think it's just been amazing to hear, and it's just a great reminder to me of how what was the genesis, what was the shift, what was the recognition that said, I can't do this way any longer. I must change. I must adapt. And that's one of the things that I really love and appreciate about you, is that you learn from what you're seeing in the field, you adapt, and then you can solve that problem because you're interested in seeing not results for results' sake, but seeing hearts change, lives change, communities transformed. And that's ultimately what we're all about. So thanks for sharing the story of Genesis. And in our
Absolutely.
next episode, we will talk about, okay, what happened to bring you to Spoken Worldwide. Thanks for
Sounds
joining us,
good.
Ray.